I think 2022's designer of the year might have to be Glenn Martens. He went from working as a junior designer at Jean Paul Gaultier to having complete control for a season and creating an haute couture collection for the brand. Jean Paul Gaultier himself didn't see the collection until it was on a runway when everyone else got to see it. You may be more familiar with him after he joined Diesel in 2020 as creative director, and then being responsible in creatively relaunching Diesel to its former glory and introducing it to the runway to rave reviews. Just years earlier in 2019, Diesel USA had filed for bankruptcy protection and had been losing money for quite a while. But Glenn didn't just pop onto the scene with Diesel and Jean Paul Gaultier. Glenn's rise starts in 2013 when he joined Y Project, a relatively obscure and not so lucrative brand that he also helped in reviving and reinventing into one of the most innovative and exciting brands today. Y Project had some of my favorite shows of the year, which I talked about in my recent Patreon video. I usually don't plug my Patreon this early in my videos. I swear it was just appropriate. I won't do it again. Y Project has actually become my favorite of Glenn Martens' work, not Diesel. Even though I only found out about it and Glenn Martens after hearing about him from Diesel. So, a decent year. It was a decent year for him for sure. Let's look into the career of another one of Belgium's great fashion designers so that we can better appreciate and understand the amazing work that he's producing today at Diesel and at Y Project. Glenn Martens was born in Bruges. I'd play a clip from the movie, but every scene has so much swearing, YouTube would not like it so early in the video. So he's Belgian, and he's a fashion designer. Where do you think he went to school? St. Lucas in Ghent, where he studied interior design, of course. After graduating, he didn't feel ready to join the working world just yet, so he went to Antwerp Academy and got his fashion education there. I know, surprise, surprise. In 2008, at his graduation collection, he was immediately hired at Jean Paul Gaultier by one of the outside panelists judging the graduate collections who loved his work. He worked at various places for a while until he inevitably wanted to start up his own brand in 2012, which he did with just 2 interns working with him. This brand only lasted for 3 seasons though, as in 2013 he was offered the role of creative director at Y Project after the previous creative director and founder Johan Serfati passed away. He had worked as first assistant to Johan, so obviously Glenn was fit for the job, but he was hesitant to join as he didn't want to give up on his own brand, and Y Project was not exactly a draw at the time. But in the end, because it was small and had established its manufacturing links and customer base, Glenn took it on alongside his own brand at first. He didn't think it was going to be that hard. It was harder than running his own brand apparently. But I guess it worked out and was preferable to continuing his own label, as he ended that very soon after taking the role at Y Project. Y Project under Johan was more of an avant-garde leather-focused menswear brand in a similar niche to Rick Owens at the time, which was not what Glenn was necessarily super interested in. So he respected the founder's vision at first, which was also necessary to maintain the current customer base. But over the next few years, he slowly transitioned the brand into something that he and the whole team wanted to do. They introduced a ready-to-wear line and started designing extremely versatile garments, putting the exact same pieces on men and women, but styling it differently. Garments that can be worn in many ways to create different moods and personalities kind of became the main design ethos behind Y Project. And if you think that sounds like a very loose premise for a whole brand, it kind of is, but I think it's the best way to describe it. Be prepared to see some of the wildest fashion design choices you could think of. Not Comme des Garçons mainline level of conceptual, but stuff that is still meant to be worn in the streets level of conceptual. I only have access as far back as Spring Summer 16 on Vogue Runway, which is probably about the time that Y Project started progressing away from Johan's initial vision towards Glenn's, even though this show felt like a very stripped-back minimalist Y Project show, knowing how it is today. But I think this season is great at setting the scene for the Y Project to come. It took place in a cliche Parisian underground venue to show off its underground clothing. I think the best way to describe Y Project's beginnings is as a fashion student's wet dream. Like, looking at some of the decisions here, I think most fashion design students have come up with similar ideas while doing some, fun experimenting. There's asymmetric tops, doubling up on belts and waistbands, and adding extra hems to pants, oversized and flowy garments made up of wacky materials. Maybe it's just me, but I had fun looking at this stuff and thinking, so that's what it would look like if someone actually made it. Interesting. A lot of the stuff feels like ideas many designers may have had off the cuff, but never actually made because they thought it wouldn't work commercially or fit in with the rest of their work. But these are things that do not matter to Glenn Martens, really. He refused to put any logos on his clothes for a long time because he saw it as a lack of integrity. To him, integrity meant living the dream of not having to sell out and be authentically yourself to explore design and its limits. I'm sure if he did use logos more, especially when Logomania was at its peak around 2016, Y Project would have grown faster. But he wasn't interested, and honestly, I respect it. I'm also a massive logo hater, even in 2016 when I was 9. His shows also range so much in the styles presented that being cohesive doesn't feel true to a brand trying to push the limits of design and not necessarily make super wearable and pretty clothing. Also, I was joking, I wasn't 9 in 2016. That means I would be 15 now. I'm 16. I think this fashion student vibe is a reasonable evaluation for a lot of smaller, more experimental brands when a creative director is starting out and trying to find their voice. They grow out of that phase, but in my opinion, Glenn Martens and Y Project double down on this questionable experimental aesthetic. It was not a phase. It's just what Y Project is to me, a fashion design student's wet dream. And take that as you will, but for me, I love and hate it, which feels like a common sentiment around Y Project, but also the point. I don't really hate it, I just mean that some of the choices really elicit revulsion in me, I'll say. Like looking at later shows, the brand have since developed a very distinct design ethos and built on their previous work, but I think that spirit of youthful experimentation is the essence of the brand to me. The Vogue runway write-up for Spring/Summer 17 said that Y Project proves most fun when the taste level is most questionable.
More work, more work, more work.
So it's perfectly reasonable to be deterred by certain looks. It's normal. For Spring/Summer 18, Glenn said that he'd never wanted to be considered someone whose clothes could be described as pretty. Later in Fall/Winter 21, he said that I think we always wanted to be a brand that was pushing borders and limits and playing with acceptable and unacceptable. I couldn't agree more with this outlook. There are so many clothes out there that fit the category of pretty, which is why I think I personally am more drawn to more esoteric genres of fashion. I don't know how I feel about using the word esoteric, but I mean, I threw it out there. Did it land? Who knows? If I don't understand something when I first see it, or even if I have a negative reaction that I don't understand, I'm fully in. That's what I'm looking for. I want to learn more about whatever it is that I don't understand, and that's what I felt when I was first looking into Y Project initially. That being said, the eclecticness is one of the strongest and weakest points of the brand. I think being able to create such a variety of clothes for so many different styles is kind of a dream and a vice for any designer. And while for the most part I really enjoy Y Project's output, there are obviously things I can't get on board with, but that all comes with experimentation. I think the most fascinating, more concrete aspect about Y Project is its variability and multi-functionality. As I said, how the clothes can create different moods and personalities based on how the wearer wants to style the clothes that day. A lot of brands will say that their clothes can be worn multiple ways, but Y Project is the most literal representation of this idea. And I think this is best represented in Spring/Summer 21, also known as Pandemic Season. Instead of physical runway shows, Y Project released videos showing off their looks and the actual multifunctionality of them. The looks were presented one way, and then they would show you how you could manipulate the garment to wear it another way. This season acted as a guide for new Y Project customers to get a feel for how Y Project wants their clothes to be worn, which is in the most creative way that you can find, depending on how you're feeling that day. In an interview, Glenn expressed that he wants to challenge his customers in a way and make them ask themselves, who am I? How do I wear this? Do I want to be more experimental? Do I want a more trashy vibe? Don't know why the customers are American, but often the answers are within the garments. I hope they make people question who they are, what they feel, where they're going, and how they want to be perceived. Along with the experimentation aspect of the brand, the idea of variability and appealing to different parts of people's personalities justifies more questionable characteristics about the brand, which I think most brands wouldn't be able to get away with as well. Because the brand is obviously about being new and thinking outside the box, there really is no consistency in where Glenn draws reference from, or in the styles he presents on the runway. I'm not typically a fan of when collections differ so much in aesthetic, and that seemed to be one of Glenn's biggest criticisms when he started out. But as I said, I think as the brand has grown, that choice to work so eclectically is justified because of what it's going for. It's a brand that you really can't put in a box. It has streetwear elements to fine tailoring back to an emphasis on reinventing everyday fabrics like denim. It's all about making new ways to express yourself through these typical fabrics or silhouettes. He's mentioned before how contemporary urban life provides so many choices that it's hard to have a solid identity, which I think explains his reference selection, and as a designer, he does often reference from everyday life and the clothes of average people. Because of this, to me, he fits in somewhere with the likes of Demna and Martine Rose, especially in these earlier Y Project shows. Vêtements put much more emphasis on graphics and irony. Martine Rose keeps her silhouettes more true to reality, and then Glenn Martens is the more radical of the bunch in his general design choices. But all of these designers were ahead of their time, and although Demna found success faster for whatever reason you want to believe, it's interesting to see how they've all branched out and grown to become such popular designers today in their own right. In spring summer 19, Y Project had a team of only 7 people, excluding the manufacturing side. Today there are around 50. The Y Project of today is amazing because they went all in and improved the experiments that they did with the brand earlier. Signatures of the brand today include the multifunctionality of garments, the unique twisty, distorted look they've created, and Instagram-ready humor and shock, which I think helped their brand grow on social media. They haven't stopped innovating either. That's also a signature of the brand. Some recent innovations of theirs are these invisible straps and their take on trompe-l'oeil, which is in reference to similar work by Jean-Paul Gaultier and Margiela decades earlier. These looks were in collaboration with Jean-Paul Gaultier, but I think this is a great example of how you steal or copy a previous designer's work successfully by making it better, elevating it, and not making me think, oh, they just stole this from Margiela or Gaultier, because instead, I'm impressed. They've evolved the work rather than just copy and paste it, in my opinion. Hopefully, you're convinced of how great Y Project is, and if not, if it's not your thing, that's fine, because then Diesel may be what wins you over to Glenn Martens' side. I'm not going to get into the whole history of Diesel. Understitch has a great video all about it. Basically, Diesel's founder, Renzo Rosso, who also owns the OTB Group conglomerate, saw that Diesel was failing and wanted to revive it. They needed to take a risk and find a way to appeal to the younger generation again, which was their main demographic before. And I think they took that risk by hiring Glenn Martens, starting with spring summer 22. I think at first Diesel and Glenn Martens seemed like an odd choice, but if you look at how progressive Diesel was in their heyday, it made sense. Diesel didn't feel like that anymore, but obviously it could come back. In joining Diesel, Glenn said that uppermost in his mind was the belief that fashion should have agency in promoting progressive values and meaningful dialogue, something that Diesel has pioneered ever since founder Renzo Rosso set the label up in 1978. So really the choice was a pretty calculated risk. Diesel collabed with Y Project in 2018, so they were familiar with each other. Also, Diesel is most famous for its denim, and Y Project's denim is some of its best-selling products and my personal favorite denim pieces going around. I would love to have a pair of Y Project's asymmetric jeans. And when Glenn Martens joined Diesel, denim was clearly most of what he had in mind. I'll be honest here, I prefer Y Project over Glenn's take with Diesel so far. He's only just joined, and I'll admit that the most recent Spring Summer 23 collection has been my favorite so far, so I know I'm a bit quick to judge, but whatever, it makes for a better video if we have a bit of conflict. I think Glenn did a lot right when starting with Diesel. He made an amazingly relevant 7-minute film for the Spring Summer 22 collection, but I honestly had extremely mixed feelings on the looks here. Let's look at the positives before I talk about my criticisms. A lot of the positive things I have to say don't immediately come from the looks themselves, but rather Glenn's restructuring of Diesel as an organization, which is not something you usually see being pushed by the creative director. So with the whole rebrand that Diesel was going through, Glenn also reevaluated their manufacturing practices and changed the supply chain. He installed the Diesel Library, a certified fully sustainable collection of essential denim, which in future will represent 40% at least of the company's jeans offer. Each piece from this collection features a QR code that offers transparency of production. In all of the Vogue runway write-ups, he consistently mentions how the company has been changing towards more sustainable means of production in terms of material they use and dyeing methods, so as to reduce the usage of water and harsh chemicals. He does admit, however, that not everything you see is sustainable. But when shopping on diesel.com, they have a For Responsible Living label under items that they've ethically produced, which is, again, great for transparency, and in my opinion is how you do sustainability right. Be honest about it. Pretty much a lot of the things I talked about in my previous video, the future of fashion in regards to sustainability and manufacturing, Diesel is on top of, and I don't know how I missed them for that last video, but now you know. It's nice that a lot of designers who I personally like and have mentioned before are consistently being forward thinking and honest about sustainability. Does your favorite designer talk about sustainability? No, actually mine doesn't, and he uses so much polyester. Damn, I have some things to think about. Anyway, the presentation of Diesel shows have also been consistently amazing. The huge sculptures inviting the public and fashion students to attend. Love to see it. Can you tell I'm just avoiding talking about the clothes? Just remember, this is simply my opinion. I'm not claiming any of this as fact. Look, the clothes are very much a throwback to the 90s and 2000s with a plethora of acid wash denim to go around. As someone who honestly doesn't love denim, I think a lot of these looks are way too trashy to be salvaged. Glenn himself says that in fashion he likes when there's a bit of irony and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And I agree, but there's levels to it. There's a balance. And to me, Diesel leans too far to the side of ironic and just coming off tacky / trashy. Both. They come off as both. The two T's. Not, what is it? fashion word again. Chic, not chic. Honestly, I'm not sure what chic means. Elegant and stylishly fashionable. Okay, not that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to not be chic. If Glenn hasn't already referenced these two, then I'm sure he will soon. To me, this look is iconic of the terrible style of most of the 2000s, and there's plenty to go around. I don't think this stuff is cute all of a sudden. I still just don't like it as much as I did when I first saw it. But this stuff is the epitome of Diesel after all. And while Diesel had innovative marketing and inclusivity for the time, and they do have a huge archive of stuff, they were after all a very mid-range brand like Tommy Hilfiger or Coach. So I've never really found their clothes all that special. When I first saw Diesel trying his hand at runways, I was a bit confused, but obviously it seems that they're going for more of an entry-level luxury rebranding. I've seen people call Diesel the equivalent of Glenn Martens' Diffusion line, but I wholly disagree because a lot of this runway stuff is still very expensive and also very well made. And only on occasion does it evoke a Y project for me. I think as a whole, the collections are very cohesive and the set and the vibe of it works very well. But the clothes come off a bit flashy and trendy for me. One example is the Diesel belt miniskirt. Looks interesting at first, but it's basically unwearable because it's just a thick, rigid belt held together with some Velcro. It looks great for photos, but not much else. And that's the vibe I get from a lot of the clothes here. A lot of these looks lack that multifunctionality or creativity that you get in Y Project, making them kind of only fit with the trashy Diesel aesthetic. One of the biggest draws seems to be the new Diesel logo, and I admit, it's a cool logo that has been used creatively, but still it's been a bit overused. And in my experience, you can have the coolest logo ever, but logos really don't last that long in fashion, which is why brands are always reinventing their logo motifs to plaster on stuff every season. It does sell, but I can't help viewing logos through this lens. And I mean, I'm sure Glenn Martens feels the same considering his previous thoughts on logos. But of course, Diesel is a huge brand that wants logos, so fair enough. Doesn't mean I have to like it though. One of my favorite things about the clothes are the washes and textures, which I'm sure are not sustainable at all. I love the smocked pieces. There was this crusty, cracked dress, which was amazing. They should have used this texture more than once. And there are other aspects that intrigue me, but I just don't get how all this fits together under Diesel. Diesel's motto is for successful living. Their motto and vision is honestly very broad, and I think Y Project suits it better because their clothes can be interpreted many ways. To me, Diesel is very singular in its aesthetic so far. I don't think it currently has longevity to it. That's my prediction anyway. There are some good ideas for sure because it's coming from a great designer. But overall, it's almost too close-minded for the vision of a brand like Diesel, who in the end specializes in denim. Their denim on their runways is overdone and not to my taste, and their denim outside the runways is fine. Seeing their runways does not inspire me to buy their more affordable denim because it feels worlds apart. I think that's my biggest problem with the brand overall. The messaging does not seem connected to the clothes. The clothes would suit a smaller Euro trash style brand more than Diesel, which is a common problem when trying to be creative under an established yet universal brand. I don't think Glenn's time at Diesel will end up like Raf Simons is at Calvin Klein. Clearly he's been successful so far, and Diesel have marketed to their audience much better and clearer. And their marketing, in my opinion, has been their strongest point, which it always kind of has been. I'm very interested to see where Diesel goes and if the hype lasts. Perhaps now that they've reeled in their target audience, the brand will shift towards something with more longevity. I don't know, but I'm curious, and I'll keep watching. To summarize my opinion on the brand, I get excited when I see the shows, but that excitement quickly fades as I lose interest in the overall vision and a lot of the individual looks. I'm not really interested in buying anything, I just observe and think, cool, but I'm not convinced. It's like just on the cuff. Maybe it's just not for me, and I'm not trying to slam anyone who does like it, of course. I'm just trying to rationalize my own thoughts. In front of a camera, on YouTube. What a thing to do, huh? If I was to rate Diesel on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 being like I feel neutral about it, 1 is I despise it, and 10 is I love it, I would probably give Diesel a 6.5. I don't know why I felt the need to explain the universal 1 to 10 rating system, but just in case you wanted my interpretation of it, there you go. Y Project, I'd give Y Project a 9. I really like it. Cool. That's all I have to talk about. There's also the Jean-Paul Gaultier haute couture show that I mentioned at the start that Glenn Martens did, but I don't really have anything interesting to say about it. It was good. It was good. Thanks for watching. I hope I explained myself well. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear why. I post an extra, less edited video a week on my Patreon. As I said, this week's video was on my top shows of the year. Oh, also, rest in peace, Vivienne Westwood. Damn. She lived a great, long life. Let's hope we don't start seeing a string of legendary designers die out. There are a lot of old designers in fashion still working. I'm looking at you, Ray and Yoji. Come on. You got a decade left in you at least. We already lost Issey Miyake last year as well. Anyway, now I don't know how to end the video. It feels wrong to end it on like a stupid meme or something.
Liv, come here. Liv. I didn't even know where Bruges fucking was. It's in Belgium.